The biggest nation in the world is about to shrink, and this event could generate an unprecedented crisis that is about to explode. Currently, China represents more than 1/6 of world's population, having a population of approximately 1.4 billion people. In other words, every 6 people in the world, 1 is Chinese. However, after 4 decades of extraordinary growth that made China's population increase from 660 million to 1.4 billion people, its population is about to decline for the first time since the Great Famine in the 1960s. So, how did China get into this situation? And what are the consequences of this population crisis for the country? Let's find out on this video. But before that, make sure to subscribe to this new channel to see more videos about economy and interesting economic facts from around the world. According to the latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics of China, China's population grew in 2021 by 480,000 people. While this is an impressive number for any other country, for China, it is only a mere fraction of the annual growth of 8 million people commonly seen a decade ago. This slowdown in China's population growth has been going on for years and is only going to get worse. To visualize, according to World Bank data, China's total fertility rate, number of births per woman, was 2.7 in the 1980s, well above the 2.1 needed to replace deaths in the country. From 1993 onwards, it reduced to below 2, and in 2020, it reached 1.7. For comparison, in the United States and Japan, fertility rates are respectively 1.6 and 1.3. In addition, according to the Financial Times, the birth number in China has reached the lowest level since 1960, the year in which the country faced a great famine that killed millions of people in the country. This way, we realize that China is facing the beginning of a persistent demographic and population crisis. Let's then understand this crisis that is about to explode. To understand the history of the Chinese population, we need to understand 3 government policies on the subject. The first one was the one-child policy established in the 1980s. In order to control the rapid population growth of that time, the Chinese government established the one-child policy that only allowed couples to have 1 son or daughter. Basically, the aim was to control the birth rate of the population and thus reduce the pace of population growth, which was very fast at that time. In general, the policy reached the desired effects over the following decades and helped to control the population growth rate. However, after several decades, this policy began to have negative effects on the country. In 2015, the Chinese Party began to identify the first signs of a demographic crisis by analyzing the country's census data. In it, it was clear that the growth rate of the Chinese population had become very low, and as a consequence, the population of the country would start to shrink. Thus, the government implemented the second population policy in the country. In it, the Chinese government suspended the one-child policy and established the two-child policy. From that year on, Chinese couples could have 2 children. The government was clearly encouraging an increase in its population. But the government would soon realize that this policy would not have the desired effects and would not be enough. This would start the third population policy in the country's history, the 3-children policy. In 2021, China would legally authorize Chinese couples to have 3 children and to encourage even more its citizens. The government started to offer financial incentives. Clearly, the government was extremely concerned about the negative inflection and the beginning of Chinese population decline. Projections prepared by a team from the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences show that in 2022, China will experience a decline in its population for the first time since 1960. This turning point in the country's population came a decade earlier than expected. To give you an idea, in 2019, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences expected the population to peak in 2029 at 1.44 billion. However, the current data from the Shanghai Academy of social sciences show that China's population has already started to decline at an average annual rate of 1.1%, which will make the country's population reach 587 million people in 2100, which means it becoming less than half of what it is today. This population decline is already raising concerns in the government, which sees that this event could have a profound impact on China's economy and be the beginning of an unprecedented crisis. So, before we explain what could happen in the Chinese economy, don't forget to like the video so we can bring you more relevant content. Also, if you're interested, check out the link below to see how to start your online business as I did. As is well known, in recent decades, one of the main reasons for Chinese economic growth has been its vast workforce and its young population. This huge workforce has allowed the country to have a global competitive advantage by having extremely low labor costs and thus having a cheap production structure. This encouraged several industries and international companies to use the Chinese workforce and made possible an economic boom in the country. The practical result was that the country and its economy grew at high rates for years with the use of its population labor workforce. However, now as its population begins to shrink and get older, the country's economic costs and competitive advantage will begin to weaken. This is because, on one hand, a smaller population puts upward pressure on labor costs, and the country begins to face competition from cheap labor from other nations such as Vietnam, Bangladesh, and India. Today, to give you an idea, manufacturing labor costs in China are already twice as high as in Vietnam. And on the other hand, an older population requires directing more economic resources towards the provision of health, medical, and care services for the elderly. To give you an idea, the share of China's GDP spent on health and pensions is forecast to rise sharply from 10% in 2014 to 20% in 2050. All these expenses do not presuppose an increase in benefits, but only maintain a smaller and now older population. In addition to producing less, due to the reduction of its working age population, the country will still have fewer resources available for its ambitious infrastructure and investment policies. As a result, there will be no alternative other than raising taxes and thus losing even more the competitive advantages of a low-cost economy. And this is the ideal scenario for an unprecedented crisis in the country. The same factor that made the country the economic engine of the world could be the trigger for a demographic, social, and economic crisis. In this case, despite prediction that this will be the Chinese century, the country's current population scenario suggests that the country will face fierce competition from other countries in Asia, especially India. In fact, estimates already indicate that India will surpass China's population in 2027, thus facing Chinese population and its economic hegemony. Well, now that you know more about the China population crisis, please help this channel by telling us what other country or economic issues you'd like us to analyze. Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our new channel to see more videos about economy and interesting economic facts from around the world. And don't forget to turn on that notification bell, and we'll see you in the next one. Until next time, goodbye.